For the second time in Rev Reads history, I want to welcome you to the unseen realm. 4 years ago on Rev Reads, I reviewed this book by Michael Heiser. So that was about 250 book reviews ago. And a lot can change over the course of 250 books. So, with the release of the 10th anniversary expanded edition of The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, it seemed to me to be an excellent time to go back into what may be one of the most polarizing books in the church over the last 25 years. Now, my feelings on The Unseen Realm were very mixed the first time. I loved some things, I couldn't stand others. So, on a second read, would I be just as torn? Or find myself leaning one way more toward Michael Heiser or more away from Michael Heiser? Well, first, let's talk about the appearance of the extended edition. If a book is advertised as the 10th anniversary edition, I want it to look excellent. Something that could serve as a collector copy for someone who owned an earlier printing of the book. And I gotta say, this really hits a home run on that account. The design work by Lexum, this is one of their best. They really put a lot of effort into making a very attractive dust jacket. They've been doing wonderful work over the last few years. It just looks great. And then you take the dust jacket off, and the book, in my opinion, looks even better. Not only do you have this nice teal font that really stands out there on the cover, but you go to the back and it looks even better as you have Psalm 82:1 in Hebrew. That was the inspiration for Heiser's own journey into the unseen realm. God stands in the divine assembly. He judges among the gods. And then on top of that, this book it's not just that it looks nice, but it really is expanded. Not just expanded with a note here and there, but it is filled with notes by Michael Heiser throughout the book. And the notes are set apart from the original text of the book. They're put in these grayed out boxes so you can tell which is added and what is original. And I really like the notes. What they are is Heiser answering questions that a lot of readers had about various sections of the book. And then there's also an added bibliography in the back. Lexum says it's 37% new content, which is a lot. So I am very happy with the design, very happy with the additions. So the question is, how do I feel about the Unseen Realm now compared to 4 years ago? Well, today I would say I am much more in line with Heiser as far as being more comfortable in his terminology in the unseen realm, which allows me to understand and accept a lot more of what he is teaching. Now, there are still several places throughout the book where I butt heads with Heiser and I don't agree with him, but overall, I like his writings more now than 4 years ago. And if you have a few minutes, I would like to tell you a little bit more about the unseen realm. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books on the spiritual realm, angels, demons, spiritual warfare, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my latest book reviews. Also, like and share this video with others to let them know about Lexum Academic. The most affordable way to build a theological library today is through Logos Bible software. Follow the link in the description to buy your Logos edition of The Unseen Realm. Or follow the second link I have in the description so that you can enjoy Logos's very helpful Bible study tool software for free for 60 days on your own personal computer. So let me start by talking about my two biggest conflicts with Heiser. I still think he depends too much on intertestamental writings and the writings of other nations around ancient Israel. I don't know if it's just really hard to not be heavily influenced by them as Heiser is if you're studying and reading them a lot as he did, but I do think there's a danger of, for instance, reading too much Ugarit and other writings and allowing them to cloud your biblical worldview. And at times, I do think Heiser leans a little bit to being too much influenced by those other cultures in the way that he views some passages. And then the one place that bothered me the most the first time I read through the Unseen Realm well, it's still there, and I still kind of feel just as strongly about it. And that is his writings on Mount Hermon and the gates of hell, how that adds background to Matthew chapter 16. I still don't really see it. I get why he writes it, but I feel like this is too much for grasping for things that aren't there. And I think Matthew would have needed to be more explicit in order for us to make the connection that's made in this book. Now, there's a lot that I could say about things that I like from the unseen realm, but I think what I want to do for this review in particular is to speak to the reader who is going to encounter the unseen realm for the first time, or maybe somebody who read it before, you got a few chapters into it and you're like, ugh, I don't like what he is saying about the gods and the divine council. And what I want to encourage you to think about is to be prepared when reading Michael Heiser to have commonly accepted concepts that are so broadly accepted throughout the church. You accept them as well, and be ready to have those familiar concepts presented in original, more Hebraic terms. Heiser is using Hebrew terminology for concepts that you already probably believe, even if you might reject him because of the terms that he's using. The most difficult hurdle in my mind, and I think for a lot of readers when reading this for the first time, will be the use of gods for angels and demons. Because we've been trained rightly to believe that Yahweh, the Lord and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, is the one and only God. But the more accurate reading would be that he is unique among the gods. Gods should be seen as a term for spiritual beings. All of the angelic hosts are gods, but none of them are like or a being on the same level or really anywhere near the level of Yahweh. He is the only creator. He is the Alpha and Omega who spoke the world into existence. But we need to remember that in the Hebrew world, they didn't have terminology for spiritual beings that we use today. So they called them gods or sons of gods. Words that we use today like angels and demons, they didn't exist in the Hebrew Bibles. Angels were just called the Hebrew word for servants. No spiritual beings were called demons, and the Hebrew Bible referred to them all as gods. And if you can grasp that simple idea that the gods in the Hebrew Bible aren't competing on the same level of God as Yahweh and the Lord as they would be in a pagan worldview, but at the same time that word means they're spiritual beings, what we call angels and demons today, if you can grasp that, so many of his insights just make sense. And that language, that terminology was really hard for me to swallow. But after 4 years of thinking through what Heiser wrote, reading a couple other of his books, and then rereading through the unseen realm, especially spending time, looking through the Old Testament from that perspective, I think he's right. Most of us already believe in a hierarchy of angels and demons. We see passages such as Ephesians 6:12, which speaks of principalities, powers, and rulers. And we know those refer to spiritual hosts. We know that refers to different levels of authority in the angelic world. We know that there are angels and archangels. So the idea of a divine assembly or council fits in this worldview that we already hold to. But what might be most difficult for a lot of Christians, especially in the Reformed background, to accept is Heiser's writing on the purpose of the divine council, and then ends up being the purpose for mankind as well. You find this in his chapter on peril and providence. God rules as sovereign over his council. But the reason God has a council is that he wants the council to be free to act based on their knowledge, their wisdom, and their will. Now, when the gods of the divine council failed, we need to understand they didn't fail as they were acting out the decree and the will of God, because God wanted them to rule with their own knowledge and with their own will. But when they failed, the Lord, Yahweh, remained sovereign. He was king over them, and he rightly judged them in the assembly. And now mankind, we're called to move into a position of being the new family of God. This family is being formed right now as people believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ and come to faith through Jesus and enter into that family. And one day we'll probably have those roles of divine counsel in the new heaven and the new earth. Now, Heiser and I differ a little bit on our meaning and understanding of faith. He takes faith more as allegiance. I take it more as trust. But if I'm honest, we both hold allegiance to Jesus and we trust in Jesus to do the completed work for our salvation, so we can talk that out in glory along with the Apostle John. Now, I think everyone will be stretched in good ways by reading The Unseen Realm. And for those who read it before, both as a fan, I think you will love this new edition and the additional material. And if you read it before and you just came away like, oh, I don't like the way he writes about things, and you had more questions than answers, well, the additional material might just answer a lot of those questions that you had and also answer them in Heiser's own words. Interestingly enough, though, the best note I found in the expanded edition was a note on, of all things, in a book on the unseen realm. It was on baptism and circumcision, where he gave what he said would be the only biblical defense for infant baptism, which I gotta say was the best defense I've ever read on infant baptism, and don't really read anyone else who uses that same defense. But I'll keep on baptizing people for their profession of faith, which appears to be Heiser's view as well, in spite of what he wrote. He seemed like he could take it either way. But I gotta say, great book overall. There are places in this book where I don't see eye to eye with him. That thing I just mentioned on infant baptism would be one of them. And there's other places, but overall, this is a book that'll really challenge you to think in what I would say is a more biblical, a more Hebrew view of both the physical and spiritual world we live in. And I gotta say, fans of the unseen realm, if you want something to ask for Christmas, this would be a great Christmas present. And for those who couldn't quite get to the place of understanding what Heiser wrote the first time reading it through, the notes might help to bring a lot of added clarity. So I want to say thank you to Lexham for this great addition to the works of the late Michael Heiser.